What's up, everybody, and welcome on into One Soccer. Today, Wheels causing all kinds of problems before we get the show started, hence why we're giggling. Andy Petrillo, Oliver Platt, Gareth Wheeler, Jordan Wilson. Sorry, folks, but some things are just best left unsaid in front of the camera. But Wheels, always good
Wheels.
for a joke. No joking around last night, guys, as we started the CPL playoffs. And we had the fourth and fifth teams going up against each other. It was Pacific versus York. York for the first time ever hosting a playoff game. And York was looking to advance for the first time ever in the playoffs. And guys, they did it. It was a 2-0 victory over Pacific. Leon and Mo Babuli were the goal scorers for York. Mo Babuli scoring in stoppage time as well to really seal home that victory for York. Some shenanigans right when the final whistle went. And of course, the coaches for York were stressing out. They didn't want anybody getting carded, any chance of missing any kind of matchup against Atletico Ottawa. Cooler heads ended up prevailing. But guys, going into this, of course, the whole talk around Pacific was the inability to score. So they get blanked. With York, there was a lot of excitement there. I mean, obviously, Jordo, you and I talked about it, a team that has new ownership, new coach. Here they are in the playoffs. That wasn't going to be good enough. They wanted to advance, and they do just that. So a lot of storylines here, Ollie. What were your takeaways from that 2-0 York victory over Pacific?
Yeah, takeaways were, I've been thinking about this. I do think the first half was the worst half of football in the Canadian Premier League this season. It was
there were a couple contenders.
I've looked at some stats. If you believe the XG, this was the one with the fewest chances, I think, all season. So not a great start, but what I was pleased to see was that York United came out and earned it in the second half. I don't think this was one where, just one team won it on a mistake or whatever, as much as there probably were some in Pacific's defending here on this first goal. I think York deserved to win this game, and they can now go to Ottawa, obviously with hope and expectation that they can continue this playoff run. But I think you can already look back on this first season with the Pascal brothers as the owners of this team. You can say club record points total, first home playoff game, first playoff win. You can say you've really checked some meaningful boxes there. So I'm happy for them. As for Pacific, look, this team showed a lot of fight just to make the playoffs in the first place. But that, to be honest, says something about the way expectations have been lowered here over the course of this season. It's a long way off what it has been in the past at that club. I give James Merriman some credit. In his first season with Pacific, he increased the points total of the 2021 champions team, despite losing a lot of players. But since then, it's been a real decline. It's been trending downwards each and every year. More good players going out of the club, I think, than coming in. And he's been fighting just to keep this thing afloat. So there's a bit of a rethink, I think, needed over the course of this offseason at Pacific. And this has to go down as a big disappointment to be out in the 4th v 5th game.
Mm-hmm. How are you feeling about it, Wheels?
By the way, Valor Vancouver 2 weeks ago was
it's up there.
Just saying. First on York, I'm thrilled for the Pascal brothers and the club. Made some bold decisions. Not easy walking away from a manager as soon as they did with Martin Nash. They're being rewarded with Benjamin Mora. He's been very good. I think the team suffered through some really big injuries late in the season, which caused a dip in form. Getting Babuli back, getting Stirring back, and imagine willing to make big calls for this game. Didn't play Brian Wright in this game. Max Ferrari went from an every game starter the last couple of weeks. Now he's moved to the bench in favor of Cordova playing on the right side. He provides the service on what turned out to be the match winner, playing a different style of play. Elijah Atakubi's grown into his role. There's been a lot of buttons pressed in the right way for this team. And now I think they're a dangerous team come playoff time because they do have good players when fully fit in their team. I'm intrigued what they're going to do this weekend. So congratulations to them. As for Pacific, the biggest problem, Ollie, is Pacific over the first 3 years was one of the most eye-pleasing teams to watch. Fluid attacking football. Now this team over the last 2 seasons, James Merriman hasn't been able to find the right combinations of players that he trusts going forward. The front three, the front four, it doesn't matter. The club has had an inability to get the best out of what they have. Zanata just came on fire in the last month. More Hurd, go down the Reed, go down the list of really good attacking players that they've had, and they just haven't been able to bring out the best of the players. Is that the manager? Is that the players themselves? Is it the formation? Is it what is it? Because that's what's holding this club back. And when you score 27 goals in 29 games, regular season playoffs, it's nowhere near good enough. So I think you're absolutely right. A rethink is in order. This is a team. James Merriman said post-game that no one expected them to be there. I think a lot of people, based on track record and quality, expected them to be there. They underperformed this season. And by the way, making the call Sean Melvin over Emil Gazdov, a very young goalkeeper who's been excellent, not playing him in this kind of game, I'm not sure what kind of message that sends either. So I think there's some suspect decisions that were made and a disappointing season all around for Pacific.
Just on that note, like sometimes when you make these changes, as you just pointed out with York and how they made changes, they work. Other changes you look at and you go, maybe that was a little overthinking, especially in the goalkeeper position. We can make that comment as well with, Vancouver and Portland in MLS, with Portland going Pantemis instead of Max Crepeau. That's a story that's down the line here. But I want to get your thoughts on this, Jordan, as we look at Pacific exiting and York moving on.
Yeah, I'm delighted for York, obviously, for many reasons. But I'll just say they went into this game needing a win, favorited, and the club, this is the most important game in franchise history. Now they go into Sunday's match against Atletico Ottawa, knowing that they're underdogs, and they have the stadium and all the fans rooting against them, and they relish this. As a former York United fan, even though the player and fan, the team has changed, but that DNA is still there. They love being underdogs. They love the crowd hating them and being against them. And you're playing a quarterfinal match when you just won a few days ago. They're going to be feeling great about going into that match. Pacific, looking at their team and just doing a deep dive over the past years of the players that they had in the squad, specifically attacking players like the Bustos, the 25-year-old Diaz that won the North Star Cup. You had a Josh Hurd. You have a Gianni Dos Santos, for me, who was like electric. You're so fast. He had pace. They always had players within their squad. They had an Ollie Bassett coming off the bench in 2021. I think Pacific, James Merriman, moving forward into 2025, is finding players that he can trust. The past 2 seasons, we've seen him chop and change and basically ask players to show that you're worthy, show that I can rely on you. And even this past season is to the last 2-3 games that he kind of figured out his 14 of players that he could rely on. I think moving forward, if you're not going to be an attacking team, if you're going to play a bit more defensive, if you're going to change the style of the Pacific that we know, find players that you can trust. Because in this league where you don't have a U19 and a U21 to pull from, you have to use every single body. 23 guys have to be on the same page. 23 guys have to contribute. For Pacific FC this season, there weren't too many players that are at top peak performance for a long time. And that is why they crashed out so early.
Well, folks, we have to admit, York taking on Atletico Ottawa was the matchup we wanted, more so because of what happens on the sideline, possibly could happen on the sideline or in the post-game press conference between Benjamin Moore and Carlos Gonzalez, the 2 managers. And if you missed out a couple weeks ago when they played against each other, they exchanged some words in their post-game press conferences. If you did miss it, you can always log on to our website. The videos are there. I promise it will not disappoint. So, of course, after York won and it was going to now be this rematch with Atletico Ottawa, this is what KJ had to ask Benjamin Mora.
I'm not sure if you remember his name, but the head coach of Atletico Ottawa had some things to say about your team last time. Yeah. How excited are you to match up with them?
No, Carlos Gonzalez, I know his name very well. Yeah, it's right here. And of course, yeah, we're going to go over there.
What excites you about that matchup? You've obviously got a great record against that team.
We have nothing to lose. As I said, we're a small team trying to grow bigger. They have more responsibility. We are supposed to be the weak ones. So we have nothing to lose. They have a lot to win.
So, of course, being cheeky there, because in his post-game press conference, he was like, well, what was his name? Carlos? Of course he knows his name. But Wheels, agree or disagree that York has nothing to lose and it's really all in Ottawa's court?
I love all this banter, by the way. Well done to Benjamin Mora there. He's right. York doesn't have anything to lose. They played midweek. They're going to play at Ottawa. Ottawa, in some people's eyes, put together a super team in the summer. Hasn't been super to me. They've been good. Have they been great? No, this has been disappointing for Ottawa. They want to be in that 1-2 game. This is where they had their eyes cast. Now they're taking on a York United side with motivation now. Like, look, when Carlos Gonzalez comes out a couple weeks ago, October 6th, and says that York United are going to be the weakest playoff team. I mean, it struck up this war of words between the two managers. But we heard Juan Cordova post-game, the York United player, say, we were listening to that. I mean, this is the biggest knock-on effect. It's not a war of words between managers. I think it's given the players that extra motivation. They don't want to be told that they're the weakest squad going into the playoffs. I think they took notice of that. And that's going to be a dangerous one. And now these words that are being spoken and this controversy off the field, which is great, by the way, it takes away from the fact, and this is what Carlos Gonzalez is probably thankful of, the fact that his team can't beat York United on a regular basis. All time, York United 8-9-2. They just lost to Atletico Ottawa twice over their history. That's it. That's the bigger story and the bigger challenge that Atletico Ottawa has to face here. They're playing a team that they struggled to beat. So we have all the storylines there on the table. I just cannot wait to see it play out.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then, Jordo, as I come to you. Do you also think that this, war of words, is it something or nothing between these two coaches?
Oh, it means something. And I thought it was silly at the time for Carlos Gonzalez to even go there, knowing that potentially this could play out. I thought it was very silly to, one, if you take an L and you lose, that's the time to eat humble pie. You don't say anything. I think it's great for us to watch. But now you're basically adding motivation to a York United side that don't need it. We watched all 4 games at the same time last week. And one game we watched just because of the implications, but it wasn't a great game. It was Atletico Ottawa, Vancouver. And guess what that game ended? 0-0. So they haven't scored in 2 weeks, and they're going to go and play a York United who just won 2-0. That you struggle to beat. I'm telling you, as a player, when we went to TD Place, there's something about that stadium. Fans were very close. They would scream at you, and you would laugh because you're like, we're probably winning or we're getting a draw. But regardless, York United saying, bring it on. Whatever you guys have, we can manage. I think Atletico Ottawa should be a bit nervous. I saw the way York rallied last night in the second half. All the pressure's on them. They got all these offseason signings, as Wheels already said. If they don't come out guns blazing and playing their best football early in this match, this could be a real turnaround for York United going to a semifinal and being Atletico Ottawa. So I think he should have minced his words, but when it's out, Trills. You can't take it.
I don't know. Like, this is kind of what I want to hear from Atletico Ottawa. I want them to be the big bad wolf, right? Like, I want them to think that York United at home, that's a win for us. But the question I think we all have is, will it be a win, right? And like, Atletico Ottawa's performances have really fed into those doubts this season. So it's a brilliant narrative. You're going to have a fired up York United team that is going to be absolutely desperate to stick it to Carlos Gonzalez. But maybe you have an Atletico Ottawa team that finally delivers the kind of performance we've been waiting for and just puts them under the thumb and says, we've got more talent. We're the big boys here, and we're going to take a home playoff win.
They've given us that performance once, and I was against Forge that had their eyes on something else. One out of 27 performances, not enough for me.
I see, Jordan, they for me, I'll disagree to a certain degree because over the first 2 months of the season, I think they played that way. Then they reverted to their old ways. That was the problem. We haven't seen this since the spring. Like, that's been the bigger problem. It's been so long that you forget about the really good performances to start the year. So they're capable of it, but will we see it? Probably not.
All right, well, that's going to be the first of a doubleheader, by the way, on Sunday, gentlemen, because Atletico Ottawa facing York United 1 p.m. ET. We're going to get you started at 12:30 p.m., set you up for that one, because then right after, we're going to find out who's going straight to the final. That's the 1 and 2 match. Winner of that goes straight to the final. The loser of that still has a chance. They take on the winner between Ottawa and York. And who is in the 1 and 2? The same as last year. That would be Forge, and that would be Cavalry. Jordo, what are you expecting in this matchup? Because Forge has seen a bit of a dip in form, whereas Cavalry seems to be on the upward trajectory. Does that matter?
Forge don't lose 3 in a row. I've been trying to find a time where this happens, where Forge go on. No, Andy, they'll play poor. Maybe they play poor another game, and then they get a draw or win. That is the Forge way. To go in a must-win game to host, right? This is where you always see Bobby Smirnionis. You can see maybe one player come on and you're like, oh, I didn't really see. Sometimes it'd be Noah Jensen. He puts something different in the lineup. He attacks them differently. And then Forge end up being the benefactors always. Look, if you're a fan of this league, you have to put Forge as favorites. I will say the underdog mentality in me, Cavalry are a top-notch team. I think they have players that are playing great football at this peak time. I think that's very important to say. I would love for that to be at Spruce Meadows. I'd love for Cavalry to come into Tim Hortons Field where the boogeyman lies, where things have gone wrong for them or slightly been adjusted over the years. I'd love for them to go there and bop York. I mean, York or bop Forge. But will that happen? It's highly unlikely to say. Like Forge usually just come and step up, specifically at home, where they've only lost twice this season. That's their sanctuary for sure.
Ollie, how are you feeling about it?
Look, I think you'll find very, very few people saying that Forge aren't the best team in the Canadian Premier League. They won the regular season for a reason. They were at points in the year, there was a very big gap, I think, between them and everyone else in the CPL. The question for me is that gap maybe smaller than it has been potentially at any other point during this season? Because Cavalry in the end finished 2 points behind them. Like this wasn't a 13-point kind of domination that Cavalry had over the rest of the CPL last season. This is a team with Ali Musi fit and back in form. Jay Herdman, who you're seeing here, has come into the side and made a big impact. And most importantly, this guy, Tobias Waszewski, is the best striker in the Canadian Premier League, the most informed striker and maybe even player, periods, in the Canadian Premier League right now, and backed up by arguably the best defense in the league as well. So Cavalry have come on strong late in the season. They've been excellent for a number of weeks now. I still think it's Forge's title to lose, but the gap is much, much smaller than I think it has been at previous points in the season, and maybe the perception is, to a wider audience right now.
Touche, Ollie.
Forge only 2 losses at home all season. That's including playing MLS sides. An excellent home side. They will be favorites. But to Ollie's point here, of all the times, Cavalry and Forge have played 30 times before, and no team, and only on one occasion a team won by more than 1 goal, and that was Cavalry at Atco Field back in 2021. All of these games are close. Problem is, Cavalry haven't won in Hamilton their last 8 trips there. That's a big problem. I understand that. Just 4 losses on the season for Cavalry. It's been really, really good. But Forge at home, if this game was being played in Calgary, maybe I feel a little bit different, which makes this game so crucial to the Cavs. They got to get back to Calgary and play a final there, because I think if the final's in Hamilton, I'm not sure they win that game.
It'll be an interesting one because we know a lot of eyes, of course, are going to be on Cavs, who the Forge is their nemesis, especially in the playoffs. And then, as we know, Forge trying to do something that's never been done before, which is win the Shield and the Cup in the same year. Let's turn our attention to Major League Soccer, because there were 2 Canadian teams that were in that play-in game. We'll touch on CF Montreal in just a moment. They are out, sadly, but good news, there is a Canadian team still going strong, Vancouver Whitecaps. And boy, are they ever going strong, because Ollie, it wasn't a 1-0 victory over Portland, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0. It was a 5-0 victory. Ryan Gauld getting a hat trick as well. They move on. They're going to take on LAFC, the team that eliminated them in the playoffs last year, also eliminated them from CONCACAF Champions Cup. But what did you make of Vancouver's performance?
Just a massive breakout performance after what's been an absolutely rough end to the season for the Whitecaps. And the story for me has to be Ryan Gauld in this game. Like, that's why you spend big money on a DP. You try and bring in a player like that, is to deliver in moments like this. And, that's, I think, is that the best performance by a Whitecap ever? I think given the circumstances and the performance he delivered, it has to be. You look back, and I know there's some debate right now as to whether the play-in games or the wildcard games, as MLS calls them, are actually playoff games. But he's only the 3rd player, if you do consider it a playoff game, to have 4 goal contributions in one playoff match. The other 2, Javinko and Landon Donovan, so the best players who have ever played in this league. And it delivers just a second club playoff win for Vancouver. So I thought he was magnificent all night. The second goal obviously was absolutely brilliant, but some of his all-around play was just exceptional. He's all over the pitch. Just a massive night for Ryan Gauld when his team needed him most.
Yeah, we said it all season, like, Vancouver are a better away side than they are at home. So was this a blessing or a curse that Supercross was going on at BC Place? Good for them. Now they take on LAFC, their nemesis, a team that's kind of been their bogey team. They have a long way to go there in terms of having any hopes of advancing against LAFC. I will say this, what was notable was on the other side of the equation, Andy. For me, Portland were terrible. And beyond being terrible, what about the decision by Phil Neville to start James Pantemis over Max Crepeau, a Canada number one. Like, this is a huge storyline from a Canadian perspective. I don't think this is a good story. And this is what I've been saying for quite some time now. I don't think Max Crepeau is anywhere near a lock to be Canada's number one. If you can't start an MLS playoff game over another fellow Canadian, then I think that this position is open up for grabs for the national team. And by the way, the numbers support Phil Neville in that decision. Pantemis was better statistically on the season. Like, post shots, expected goals minus goals allowed, which basically says, the better the number that you have, the better you are at making saves, or the better luck you have. Crepeau is fourth worst in Major League Soccer at minus 3.8. He conceded 1.95 goals per game. That was fourth worst in Major League Soccer. Neville even said it. We need to score 2 or 3 goals a game to go out and win. His 59% save percentage, worst in Major League Soccer. So this is at the very least something to follow here. But that decision caught me by surprise despite all that, because it's Max Crepeau, right? Like, he's quality. Just the numbers don't look great, and that decision doesn't look great.
Is this a Crepeau thing, or is this a Portland Timbers thing?
I was going to say James Pantemis got lit up.
The defense has been a disaster,
but the numbers,
without him.
I just showed you the numbers, and if you look at the numbers with Pantemis playing, they were better defensively, and they were conceding fewer goals. Look, I'm not saying he's a better goalkeeper than Max Crepeau. I'm not suggesting that. But you can back up the manager's decision based upon the numbers.
I thought, like, Phil Neville came out and did an interview pre-game where he said Max is probably our number one, but he's not playing in a playoff game. Like, I found that confusing. I think their defense has been terrible all year. Like, I don't know how much you can entirely pin that on Crepeau.
Well, here's the thing. We're not talking about Portland anymore. From a Canadian point of view, we'll start talking about Crepeau again come November 15th when they play in CONCACAF Nations League. But Vancouver moving on. CF Montreal, gentlemen, sadly not. But here's the thing. Against Atlanta, they were down 2-0. They managed to tie it up, send it into penalties. They fall in pens, though, 5-4. And obviously, it was crushing, because we just finished talking about the Whitecaps, who I believe we're winless in 8 games heading into the playoffs. Meanwhile, you have Montreal, who was on a roll since mid-September to get themselves into this playoff position. But, tough loss also, considering Jordan, that a matchup would have been against Inter Miami and Lionel Messi.
Yeah, for sure. But I look at his team. I think that with CF Montreal, they found some gems late in the season that they have something to really think about going to next season, right? Some young players that are stepping up and playing. You look at CF Montreal, unlike Vancouver Whitecaps, this is still a team that a few years ago had a squad, and they still haven't really rebuilt it properly. Great save here. But I think, or people will say poor pen. Either way, I look at CF Montreal and the young players that stepped up in the last bit is something to really to take. And yeah, maybe you would have been playing Messi and company, and that would have been a nice milestone as well. But I think there's a lot of good points from this last bit of the season.
Wheels?
Look, this is about what you expect. 8th, 9th place. Like, midway through the season, this team was listless, lifeless. They got rid of experienced players and they went young. If they can line up their contracts and bring back these young players, next year can be a good year. Saliba, Marshall Ruddy, Clark, Duke, Alvarez, like, they were exceptionally younger than this Atlanta United side. And some of that immaturity showed during the course of the game. Vilsaint, like, there's some good young players there. It's about the future. It's not about this year. It's not about this matchup. That's just about all that you can expect. Again, I'll throw up the calling card, to the owners. Spend a little bit, insulate, protect these young players a little bit more, and they may be even better in the end.
The big question for me, Andy, quickly is what do you do with Joseph Martinez on that note? Like, 14 in 26, very good return in the end, but he was inconsistent through the year. He's got an injury history at age 31. He had a big mid-season blow-up with Laurent Courtois. Like, that's a big decision they have to make on him.
Keeping an eye on CF Montreal for sure in the offseason, because it was a great run near the end for them that ended in the play-in. Let's get now, gentlemen, to the Visa Women's Soccer Report. Canada back on the pitch tomorrow to take on the reigning World Cup champs, Spain. Pre-game coverage begins 3:30 p.m. ET right here on One Soccer. Outside of the head coach, because this is what we talked about, guys, and how they just don't have one. What are you keeping an eye on here, Ollie, when it comes to this team?
Well, I mean, I think an interesting question is, like we've talked about, that it's not an ideal situation to not have clarity on your head coach, but is there maybe some players, given the way things ended with Bev Priestman, who might benefit from, changing in terms of the coaching staff, and maybe having some different eyes on them with a couple of new faces coming into the coaching staff as well. So you look at players like Evelyn Vienne, Gabby Carl, Julia Grosso, Olivia Smith left out of the Olympic squad, players who weren't always in favor. Is there an opportunity here for maybe one of those players or multiple of those players to stake their claim here as kind of a new era begins? So that's something I think interesting to keep an eye on.
I feel like a broken record, but for me, it's scoring, but from the forwards. Last time, at the Olympics, when we saw them, 2 forwards scored. Chloe Lacasse, who, by the way, had to leave this camp because of injury. Evelyn Vienne scored. She came off the bench. That was in the first game. After that, it was Vanessa Gilles, who stood up, Fleming, who scored. And then in the crucial quarterfinal game, they got blanked. No Leon, no Haidema, no Nichelle Prince. I'm just curious to see once again, where's the goal scoring going to come from when it comes from the forwards? Obviously, you always want by committee, you want depth, but your forwards are meant to score. So I'm curious to see how that'll happen.
But I don't even know if you can judge it this window. What I'm curious about, and I always love when the national teams get together and play games. Who's making the decisions here? Like, who's leading this? Like at the press conference, you have Caitlin Collar, who is being named the interim technical assistant, and Diana Matheson, who's in a support role of the team doing the press conference. It's not the manager. There's no play. I don't understand. The game's being played at 10 p.m. local time at night. Like, look, the men's national team made the difficult decision, and people didn't like it. Last October, when they didn't have a manager, just play games that window. Save some money in an association that needs it. It's very difficult to turn down the opportunity to play a team like Spain. I get it. I absolutely get it. And people like seeing the team playing, but what are they getting from this? I don't know. I'd love to know who's calling the shots. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a matter of just being together as a team, that type of intangible, right? Because you're right. We have a lot of questions, and I think it's kind of been it's a very weird situation for the team to be playing in this. Let's get to our tonybet top picks. How about we look at MLS Cup winners for our winners here, our tonybet top picks? Miami, the favorite. Galaxy have the second best odds. Columbus Crew, LAFC, both plus 658. If you like the Whitecaps to win it all, by the way, folks, they're plus 6490. Where's the value, Wheels?
I like the Columbus Crew. I'm backing them to win MLS Cup. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If you want to bet on Inter Miami, do so at your own peril, because you need to defend come playoff time. And this team, not a great defensive side. Like, they attack, like they're top players, and they're great players. They're match winners. And that's why they always have a chance, but they don't collectively defend. How does that play out in the playoffs? Like, in terms of a data perspective, Inter Miami expected goal differential per 90 minutes was like down 9 or 10th in the Eastern Conference. Columbus was right at the top. The two best teams from a data perspective, the Crew and LAFC, both of them anywhere between plus 650, plus 700. I think either one of them would be a superior play to make.
Who are you choosing, Jordo?
LAFC. There's a reason why they top the Western Conference. I think they're a balance side. I think the way that they go forward, I think the players that they have within the squad. Again, this is a flip a coin. I don't bet. I have no money. I say this every time. But if I had some, LAFC. I think so. I think Wheels just shout to it with Crew. I see them in the finals as well, but hey, we'll see.
Western Conference. The reason why I edge Columbus, I think the Eastern Conference is weaker than the West. I think there's better competition in the Western Conference. That's why.
20 seconds, Ollie. Who do you have?
Look, I like the Crew too, but I don't know. There's one team that has Lionel Messi. I definitely wouldn't be writing them off.
Well, Wheels just said at your peril.
Can you believe people voted against Messi for MVP? Like, these hipsters that are trying to find reasons to vote for anyone else than Messi as MVP. Get a grip, man.
Yeah.
All right, crazy. I feel like that's a show for another day. We have to talk Inter Miami being like, are they favorites or not? And we have to talk Lionel Messi and MVP or not. Book it for next One Soccer.
Okay.
That's it for us here. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll talk to you later.